Welcome to One MOAR Take. My name is Mohith Mohan, and I'm the CEO and founder of MOAR Advisory. This series brings you conversation with people shaping how enterprises think about capability, talent, and the future of global delivery. So today we actually are going to take a closer look at a space that's growing fast, but it's always not very clearly defined. I think there's been definitely what I would say trends in the market in terms of how this industry is being perceived. But when companies are setting up these global capability centers, or in short, they call it GCCs, they're building teams that handle everything from finance to technology to analytics and customer experience and engineering for the entire enterprise. Now, these are hubs that run critical work, but they in many ways have been seen as behind the scene. So the big question we are exploring today is simple. What makes a country ready to host and scale these centers? And today we're going to talk about is South Africa shaping a new standard for this. And to help unpack that, I'm joined by none other than Clayton Williams, the CEO of CapeBPO. So welcome, Clayton, to the show. Really excited to have you on board. Clayton is someone who's been deeply involved with the Western Cape's capability and building the talent story narrative. So I'm excited. Welcome again, Clayton.
Thank you very much, Mohith. Honor and privilege to be part of this conversation.
Great. So Clayton, keep this really, if I would say, interactive. I do have a bunch of questions, but I'm hoping the way we'll structure this is we make this two-way. We'll keep these conversations going. And I thought the best way to really talk about it is to start off with where the industry is today. Really talking about certain shifts that's happening that you see. So if you could really start with what I would say foundational, right? When we talk about when we talk about a country being, employment ready, or in today's context, what we are talking about is GCC ready. What does that actually mean in practical ground reality terms for enterprises? And here, enterprises, when we talk about is for CXOs, could be a CIO, could be a CHRO, who's really making these decisions. So your thoughts around what are those foundational aspects when you think about that?
Sure. So I think maybe to start it off with is the satisfying of what we frame as horizontal enablers. So I think definitely infrastructure is a key consideration, whether it's building infrastructure, whether it's fiber infrastructure, whether it's transport infrastructure. I think broader infrastructural foundations need to be in place when considering or putting yourself forward as a GCC location. And that's literally, I think, the first, from a decision-making perspective, that's the first tick in the box is this potential location infrastructurally ready for to host and deliver GCC services from. I think second, from a supply perspective, it's a no-brainer. Talent. Is there talent availability within the region? Is that talent, tenured? Are they capable from a technical and functional perspective? Are they ready to embark on global delivery? So I think a key consideration, or the second one, in my opinion, would be talent availability. And then I think the third one would be quite simply framed as ecosystem mobilization. Is there an ecosystem which can enable delivery? It could be from a government support perspective. That could be from a private sector value chain perspective. I think enabling these services is critical from an ecosystem enablement perspective, because then you're not alone in region. You've got the different levers and support structures to leverage on when delivering GCC services out of the location.
Very interesting. I love the way where you spoke about the ecosystem. I think it's such a integral part of everything coming together to make it actually work. That kind of segues into a very interesting one. And I know you've been in constant conversations, whether you're hosting people, in Cape Town, or you're traveling, you have a series of conversations with leaders, CXOs across, what I would say large enterprises, people who are exploring to set up their global business services, BPMs, BPO, in the city of Cape or the Western Cape as a large, region. What trends are you seeing, Clayton, right now? Really, if I would call it as opportunities that you're kind of picking up in some of these conversations.
Yes, I think that the buzzword or phrase has been for the past couple of years, automation and AI and Gen AI. I can't even keep up with the precursors to AI. They're evolving so quickly. and obviously understanding the impact of AI or technology on traditional business services and how they're developed and delivered. So I think that's the major trend is, understanding the impact of AI on those traditional business services. And then I think more positively, so how AI is practically kind of augmenting human intervention in the delivery of services, especially customer-facing services. So I think the big trend there would be understanding the impact of AI, and the flip side or the negative is, the worry around, is it going to displace a certain portion of the workforce, which I think is inevitable with basic and rudimentary tasks. But turning it around, what are the opportunities around AI? Is it augmentation of workforce? Is it virtual and digital workforces that is enabling better efficiencies and speed when humans are delivering? And we've already seen countless examples of organizations that are almost getting ahead of the curve and implementing and deploying AI solutions in their current operations to support their human workforce, which I think is great and necessary, in order for us to mitigate any potential displacement. And then I think that the key one from us, and it's relative to our value proposition, is probably the development or the selling or the packaging of domain expertise and knowledge. From a pure BPO perspective, we've done really well within certain verticals like retail, utilities, travel, telco, and financial services, and almost enhancing the narrative around the location as deep domain expertise relative to these verticals. A big emerging one is healthcare. So once you build deep domain expertise and you've got the relevant technical and functional competencies, it does become a very compelling value proposition. And that, from a selling perspective, is really where we've seen that trend emerge probably over the last 12 months, is the balance between the impact of AI, the human capability, but also the deep domain expertise. And what I'll throw in there also, I think a lot of clients globally are looking for value in terms of choosing a location. It's not just a race to the bottom in terms of price, although I think price does play a big part, and there are certain price sensitivities at the moment. But it's more around the combination of pricing and quality of services delivered, which lead to customer retention. So I think it's if I was to kind of pick three major trends, it's consideration of those three things.
That's very interesting. I do think with the advent of technology, what's also happening is how humans, and like you rightly called out, how AI is going to support, augment, complement, the work that humans are doing today. I think that's a very interesting perspective, Clayton. And on that note, I see your backdrop, the beautiful tabletop mountains out there. So that kind of gets me to the top of the mind question. When enterprises are really thinking about shortlisting new destinations, what are the factors that they're considering when they're evaluating and deciding to say, hey, I want to invest in this city, this country? Just your thoughts and perspectives on that.
I think with the sensitivities related to especially outsourcing and offshoring, I think it's all around risk mitigation. So under the frame of risk mitigation, I think satisfying predictability of where you're going. So an understanding of if I set up in a region, our business operations will be pretty predictable in terms of how we function out of that region, even though it's a new region. So predictability is one thing. I think sustainability is another key component. You don't want to build operations in a location or a country and then ship them out within 12 or 24 months. I think that's just, you're not going to see the ROI on that from a client or a commercial perspective. So definitely looking at sustainability. I think supply of talent, and these might be kind of no-brainers, but these are all considerations. Supply of talent, and that's also linked to sustainability. Is there a sustainable talent pipeline that can service our operations as we evolve it over a period of time? I think regional stability, and you get to your geopolitical stability, socioeconomic stability. All of these factors, I think, play a role in convincing decision makers to set up in a new territory. And then probably finally, ease of doing business. Are policies business friendly? Is the national, provincial, and municipal governments, are they aligned in terms of execution of this policy? Does that business friendly policy relate to administratively friendly practices. So I think a key consideration there would be: is it a business? Is it an easy location to do business in from a policy and procedural perspective?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's very true. I think that's one of the critical factors of which I would say organizations look at is the ease of doing business, market entry, and then sustaining their business when they enter. So, great thoughts. And I know you touched upon talent, in just in the previous comment you made. So if I have to kind of pivot a little bit into that segment, if I would call it that way, which is around talent, skills, skill availability, and very importantly, culture, right? And here specifically about South Africa as a country, as a region. One thing that comes up often is the blend of talent, cultural alignment, and work ethic. When we think about this for South Africa and the Western Cape specifically. So, just from your perspective, as enterprises or global enterprises are really looking at setting up this, what's the one thing you think you would want them to take notice of? And I know you touched upon some of these points, but I think I'd love for you to double down a little bit on the aspect of talent, skill, and culture. If you could maybe throw some light on that.
Sure. So maybe I take a step back and almost frame what our traditional value proposition has been. We've been delivering services, in excess of 2 decades, and that value proposition was predicated primarily on voice delivery within the customer experience space. So, when we penetrated the UK market successfully, probably 2 decades ago initially, it was a very easy sell in terms of cultural alignment between South Africa and the UK. And obviously the South African accent has been well known to be quite neutral and pleasant on the ear. So we really pushed that narrative around, building a value proposition which is we are the customer experience capital of Africa, and that resonated with UK clients, and we got substantial scale within that market. Recently, we've seen a pivot towards the US market for obvious reasons, global diversification outside of the Philippines, for example, of UK clients, mitigating risks related to concentration within their traditional locations. And we definitely saw that, there was a massive uptake in US volume in South Africa in the last 24 months. And again, with that baseline value proposition of customer experience and cultural alignment, I think there's a big understanding of the US culture within South Africa, and there was also an easy transition. But I think where we've evolved to from a value proposition and looking at the Western Cape and South Africa is, pivoting towards, especially considering potential impacts of digitization and those lower complexity skills, positioning ourselves as a shared service center of excellence from a global perspective, as well as front-end customer delivery and customer centricity. So if you look at the data on it, South Africa's got a plethora of skills and pipeline related to higher value chain professional services. I think I've mentioned to you this before. One data point is we've got one of, if not the highest, chartered accountant per capita rates in the world. A really robust financial services sector within South Africa that is obviously being serviced by highly qualified and highly competent professionals. From a legal fraternity perspective, lots and lots of talent around alternative legal services, healthcare, doctors, nurses, medical professionals, within the entire healthcare remit. So I think, using that baseline from a talent perspective is really kind of repositioning ourselves that not just do we do basic customer experience, that is our core value proposition, is customer facing, but I think still absolutely activating and catalyzing our ability to deliver professional services and shared services at scale.
Very interesting. No, that's really interesting, and I know we've chatted about some of this in the past, so great insights as always, Clayton. But one of the things I think is the nature of work. You touched upon this, I think, in one of the comments about really AI, right? So the work is really shifting today. So we're expecting the workforce to be like poly-skilled, multi-skilled, and at a bare minimum, I would say even AI literate. And so they need to know how to use tools to be more productive in many ways. So from that vantage point where you are sitting, how's like South Africa preparing its workforce today to really embrace these new models? It could be through training, could be through industry, like we spoke about healthcare as one of the kind of key sectors there. Specifically around skilling, like what's kind of the efforts that's going into that?
Sure. So a simple shift and change that we've implemented, because we run together with industry aggregated skills development programs, which are there to kind of close any gaps from school leavers to the potential labor force. And over the last 18 months, we've introduced digital skilling into every single program that we undertake as an industry. So really targeted programs where before they were kind of maybe contact center foundational in construct and in curriculum, with electives based on vertical skills and domain expertise. Now, as a non-negotiable, there are digital modules included in that to improve, I think, the overall digital literacy and capability, excuse me, of the workforce that we're preparing to enter into the industry. So that's what we're doing at an industry level. I think from a basic education perspective, I know the South African government is putting a big focus on how do we start building digital capability, from as early as ECD stage, and then developing and growing that capability throughout the schooling system. So, like I said, there's huge focuses from a policy reform perspective and a traditional curriculum perspective to start digitizing that curriculum, both in construct, but also the way that it's delivered. We face in South Africa, we face certain socioeconomic realities, which mean that in most cases, or for at least 90% of students that are at school, they've got to be taught within a bricks and mortar environment. Unfortunately, pure digital learning outside of bricks and mortar schools is not mainstream yet. So I know there's a big focus on improving digital literacy at a school level. And, for me, it's always been a bit of a paradox. We've seen an absolute, for lack of better framing, proliferation of the use of smartphones. Now, you've got 3-year-old kids in townships that know how to navigate a smartphone better than me. But that hasn't translated into a digital capability yet at scale, because it hasn't been formally enhanced and entrenched at a schooling system level. So I think there's going to be major focus on doing so, and policy and curriculum reform at a national level.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Clayton. And that's a good, I think segue to what was on my mind really is when we think about a strong ecosystem or a capability of an ecosystem, it needs just more than talent. It needs all the, I would say the government, the academia, the industry, even the startups to really come together and work in sync. I'm just curious what's really working well, especially when we talk about the Western Cape, which is today creating a lot of employment. And I know there's a lot of effort that you and the team are putting towards that as well. So just maybe if you could throw some light around that on what's working well for this region.
I think that's probably been our biggest success story, Mohith, is the fact that the ecosystem functions together and has been mobilized, and consciously so. So we're fortunate in that we've got, at a provincial level and at a municipal or metro level, we've got a government that supports us as an industry. And when I say supports us, it's far greater than just throwing money at an industry. It's unblocking barriers to growth. It's supporting us when we experience, any difficulties or any lobbying for any policy reform at a national level. So we're really fortunate in that, from a public sector perspective, government is involved in the right ways. I mean, in some places it's in the wrong way, but fortunately in the right ways. And then we've got a kind of a robust ecosystem of social partners as well that play a role within developing that culture and that environment. And then I think the third component of that is obviously private sector. Private sector really works together towards a common goal. And that common goal is kind of the ideal eradication of youth unemployment, which is a big problem in South Africa. So I think that the fact that everyone's working towards a common goal, and if there's one thing I can brag about, which I haven't seen in too many places, if anywhere in the world, is that even from a competitor collaboration perspective, all of our operators work together to kind of work towards that goal. Yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect, and yes, there are clashes, but absolutely the culture and the environment that exists is that we're working together towards that collective goal. And in saying so, I think we are fortunate and unique in doing so, because that's almost the silver bullet that's going to take us to get to those unemployment targets that we're chasing. And thankfully, like I said, the whole ecosystem and value chain work together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very well put. And I think clearly there are a lot of learnings that every time I think we speak, what we can draw from, how this works back at the Western Cape. But one of the things I think which also works really well is what I would call is the policy and policy formulation and how that impacts the confidence of enterprise as well as job seekers. So just with that, with Western Capes, I know the G for J, growth for jobs, that's really something that caught on to when I was kind of reading some reports. It's gained momentum, and I think it's been a specific intervention that's kind of helped from a policy standpoint. So would love to get your thoughts around that in terms of how that's helped to really scale up and bring more investments, create more employment in the region.
I think that mechanism was kind of conceived or catalyzed in order to bring public and private sector closer together. I think there's a unilateral understanding and acknowledgement that the only way that we're going to improve our economy, both as a city, province, and nationally, is through the creation of more employment opportunities. So I know the Growth for Jobs initiative is strongly focused on how do the different kind of constituents of that ecosystem that you described earlier on, academia, private sector, public sector, and social partners, how do they work together in a structured and kind of conscious way to unlock employment opportunities? And I think the reason why it's gaining momentum is that there's a strong cadence around that strategy. So it's not just a launch and we'll check in a year's time. There are certain mechanisms that are in place that bring people together, that track progress, that kind of tackle any risks collectively. And that, for me, is why we are, from a provincial perspective, delivering success on that growth for job strategy, because, again, it's the entire ecosystem working and functioning together.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's very well put, Clayton. And, one of the things, if I have to just pivot a little bit, is, not to really go crystal ball gazing, but if you have to look, into the future and not too far, if I have to just look at a multi-year kind of a horizon. And I know you've been very focused on really kind of saying there has to be a North Star towards where we are kind of driving this region towards, from creating employment, creating that ecosystem to support it. So if you were to kind of fast forward, if I would say your vision for the Western Cape specifically, right, in terms of looking at this whole, if I would call it, providing Western Cape as the destination for building global capability, especially with what you're seeing and experiencing in some of the other parts of the world. Your thoughts on how do you think maybe a couple of years down the line you envision Western Cape playing a role in this space?
Wow, it's a wonderful question to be asked, because to your point, it's looking at, and it's blue sky type thinking. But I think we would have done ourselves an injustice if we break it up in a time frame, 5 years. If in 5 years' time we haven't kind of built a GCC referenceable capability with some or other form of scale, I think we would have failed. I think we've definitely got the right ingredients. I think from a sequential step-by-step perspective, it's creating global awareness around our capability outside of, which I think is probably going to be where we'll focus on for the next 12 months, is really, making a global audience aware of what our capability is in that professional services space. And then I don't see why, off the back end of momentum gain, why we can't double the size of the industry within the next 5 years. If we continue on the current growth trajectory, especially within verticals that are slightly more complex and higher value chain, like financial services and healthcare, and almost, parallel to that, build this GCC capability and scale that. I do think that that's very possible in terms of, and it's not just doubling in size in terms of, number of people that work within the industry. It's number of, or the value of the foreign direct investment that comes in. You can create 1,000 jobs, low complexity, and 100 jobs higher complexity, but the foreign direct investment related to that 100 jobs is far greater than the 1,000 jobs. So I think it's the type of investments into the region that we will be cognizant of and focus on. But definitely, if there was a goal that I'm working towards, or that collectively as an industry we're working towards, it's doubling the size of the industry and building, as I said, I'm going to frame it again as referenceable capability that is 100% validated and credible within the next 5 years. And this is where the city of Cape Town has been so great. They're almost adopting the framework that we're creating collectively around our GCC strategy. They're adopting that in terms of, or as part of their 5-year economic development plan, because they've acknowledged that this is so important to both the city, the province, and the country. And I don't see why this can't catalyze from a diversification or from a location strategy perspective. I don't see why this can't catalyze industries like this within the rest of South Africa. So we'd like to see ourselves as almost the pioneers of this, and if we can prove it in Cape Town and the Western Cape, scaling that to South Africa, because that makes it far more compelling for global clients. They're not just choosing cities. Clients choose cities, provinces, countries, and essentially then continents. So almost that end vision, and I'm almost making this up as I go along, because I'm realizing that the potential is a lot bigger than what we thought, is catalyzing this industry that it becomes a continental value proposition.
Wow. That's definitely. I wish I'm recording this, but I'm going to definitely use that the next time around, Clayton. That's really well said. And talking about really that, I have one final question for you.
Sure.
I think some very interesting perspectives, but if there is one message you want, like global CXOs, because obviously a lot of what we're speaking has the reach, and if there is one message that you would want to pass on for CXOs who are exploring South Africa, why come to South Africa or the Western Cape region specifically as really to build their capability? If there's one message you want to leave us with.
I think it's pretty simple, is that Cape Town, the Western Cape, and South Africa are open for business and are able to deliver services outside of what we've been framed, outside of traditional basic customer experience. There are deep domain expertise. There's deep technical and functional talent that exists within the region and the country. And, but we'd love the opportunity to showcase just how competitive we can be, both, I think, from a capability and a price perspective. We no longer want to be seen as the kind of the voice, low complexity region, as we've successfully been doing so. But I think definitely there's more to the value proposition than what we've previously delivered. And we're working together as an ecosystem to really amplify that and ensure that that's the value proposition that we present to global clients.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and as always, very well, said, Clayton. Clayton, I just wanted to say, truly, thank you. This is, been really, I think, the perspectives you share every time we talk, and specifically, I think today, the clarity that I think you're bringing in to, like you said, I'll start from the top, from a continental perspective to the country of South Africa, to a province, to a region. I think you definitely, truly mean the best, and I wish you all the best around that. But I think it's also very important that there are more leaders like this who are shaping thoughtful, future-focused, I would say, models that's helping to build capability centers, and of course, fundamentally, I think creating employment, right? I think that's really the end purpose of why we all exist as enablers in the ecosystem. So thank you, Clayton. I think really thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking this time, and really wish to many more such conversations. And to everyone else tuning in, thank you for joining us in this One MOAR Take. We'll be back soon with more conversations on how enterprises are building what's next. So until next time, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.